up next, we're going to be joined by American philanthropist Ahmed Khan. Ahmed, thanks for joining us here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Emily.
And so with you today, we want to talk about a couple of things. One, you were fairly recently in Gaza. You organized a shipment of humanitarian supplies into the Strip, and you went with your shipment, or you went alongside your shipment, and we had promised our viewers at the time that we would get your take on, like, how did you do that? How on earth did you pull that off? And also, what did you see that we're not seeing just through the images that we get out of Gaza? We've also done some coverage of something else that you're working on, which is the need to get the tens of thousands of people who need critical medical care out of Gaza to places that are willing to take them in, whose lives are at risk at every moment that they're not being allowed to get that treatment. So I'll just start here by you had shared this here's one video of your trip. So tell us a little bit about where you are and what your impression was as you're getting here.
That's called the middle area of Gaza, Khan Yunis al-Mawasi. There are a series of tented camps. And you can see that it's children, and that's what you see everywhere in Gaza. You see children. You don't really see anything else. You see children. This was a community building exercise and just sort of a kids' activity. Obviously, the schools are all destroyed, and they just try to keep the kids busy. So we just walked into it. The kids were dancing the Dabka, Palestinian dance, and there were various performers, and sort of we just came in to view it. And, you're just overwhelmed by what these kids are experiencing. What they're experiencing is something no child should ever have to experience, and actually no child has experienced what they're experiencing. They live in tents. Almost every night of the year, they listen to 250-pound bombs, 500-pound bombs, and sometimes 2,000-pound bombs landing near them. They have friends that have been killed, and they don't know when their time will be, but they just continue. So, you can see them smiling and cheerful, and it's almost amazing because none of these kids have had protein for a month or two, and none of them they mainly eat one time a day. But they still smile, so you're struck by that.
And is it bread? Like, what's the thing that they're able to get for the most part during the day?
There really isn't anything that you can count on. It just depends on what the Israeli authorities will allow in. And it's sort of idiosyncratic. It just sort of happens, sort of. Sometimes there'll be enough food in the markets and sometimes there won't. Sometimes the food will be very expensive in the markets and sometimes it won't. So there's no rhyme or reason to any of it. I've told you, I think, from the beginning that essentially the Israeli government has decided they don't necessarily want to kill everybody at once because they think it's probably not something they can get away with. But what they do is allow sort of the minimum calorie count in. So, people are just getting by on whatever's available that day. A lot of dry goods, sort of canned stuff. But it's nothing. I don't know. It's nothing anyone, sort of any of your viewers would be comfortable with, or I don't know how many people would survive in the U.S. on this.
Yeah, and then I'll let Emily let you jump in. But one question. So shortly after October 7th, you had told me as Israel unleashed its response, what you thought their plan was, and now here we are, a year and a half later, and it feels like everything is going according to the plan that you kind of thought that they were playing out at the time. And so I think that kind of gives your assessment an extra layer of credibility because it's really been borne out the last year and a half. What did you see coming, and what have you seen unfold?
Well, I think very clearly the Israeli government wants all Palestinians out, right? And they can't do it all at once. So they have created conditions that are unlivable. And at some point, they will, and I think all American officials are aware of this, and probably all European officials are aware of this because it's pretty black and white. Um, they don't want to kill everybody; they just want everybody out. So they've killed plenty of people, and people are living under horrible conditions, and they just want to get rid of all Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank and sort of remake Judea and Samaria. And I think that's Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan. I mean, it's just very clear. So I suppose now that will be up to President Trump to decide whether that's going to happen or not. I don't know. Like it's like there really aren't any world leaders who seem to. They've sort of been detached from any sort of empathy of the situation, because what the situation inside, it's truly unlivable. I mean, it's sort of bombs nonstop, artillery nonstop, F-15s, F-16s, F-35s dropping massive bombs. You're sort of every 15 minutes you're shaking wherever you're staying. If you're in a tent, it's shaking. If you're in some kind of structure, it's shaking, and the trauma is just unimaginable.
If you were to, and I'm sure you have, but talk to American officials, let's say operating in good faith, and tell them or persuade them that it is possible to not just provide the minimum calorie count, but to bring in more food, to make the situation for people living in Gaza more livable, while also protecting their security concerns. For instance, what would you tell them? How would you explain to them that it is possible to feed these children, and also like just bring in more aid? Maybe you have had those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible. I've done it in Ukraine, right? Like, so the Russians don't bomb all the border crossings, and they don't bomb all the food trucks. I think this administration just doesn't care, right? Like, so it's just not, they're just lying about every word out of their mouth is just lying. So I'm optimistic that maybe President Trump will not want to see these images and not want to see this situation, and sort of burn babies and little kids in their tents sleeping, and then sort of next thing you know they're dead. I don't know. But for American officials, let's say middle level American officials, yeah, I think they're all horrified by what's going on. They know what's going on. They see the briefings, but the decision makers in the Biden administration just don't care. They're just very dishonest about all of it. They know exactly the numbers that have gone in. They know how many people. They know what it takes to keep these people fed and healthy. I mean, you're looking at 1.1, 1.2 million children. It's over 50% of the population. What security risk do these little girls, sort of hold against the Israelis? Like, it's mind-boggling. I try not to pay attention to the stuff that comes out of the armchair quarterbacks and the conference goers,
Right.
but I mean, it's all nonsense. Like, I challenge all of them or any of them to come to Gaza and spend 48 hours, and see if they, number one, make it out alive, and number two, are still repeating these idiotic talking points about human shields and security and et cetera.
Right, or about smuggling things that can be turned into weapons through the food shipments, or what's another example, like the Hamas hoarding everything that gets into Gaza. From your perspective, you would say if you go on the ground, it's entirely possible for the United States to back humanitarian aid that's done in a way that gets to the children, and
I
that's
mean, to be honest with you, I
explainable.
could do it myself. Like, with a sort of group of collaborators. I don't even need the United States
Right.
government, because they would just make a mess of the whole situation. But it's not complex at all. There's nothing. Don't let anyone tell you it's complex. I've done it. I've delivered humanitarian assistance to every war zone the last 25 years. It's very doable. I mean, it's just a matter of whether you're gonna kill everybody delivering humanitarian assistance. It's just a decision that someone makes. But
Have you been in
if the
touch
United
with
States cared
any?
about this, it would be done. It would be easily done.
Have you been in touch with any people in the incoming administration, or tried to get? I mean,
No, I
Trump
mean,
had
I don't
that.
really know anyone. I mean, like, I'm not, I'm out here in the world. I'm not really just, I mean, it's sort
Right.
of maybe my weakness is I don't go to cocktail parties or sleazy hotel bars and stuff. So, I mean, that's where all these people hang out, I guess. I don't
It
really,
is. It
they
is.
don't really run
Yeah.
into me in places like the front line in Ukraine or Gaza or Syria, any of these places. You don't really see these kind of people around. So I don't know, no, I
Believable.
don't, I try to get the message out.
Can you give us some examples of, because I've been following your attempt to like get this shipment in and some other shipments in over months and months and months. Can you give people some examples of the kind of holdups that you wound up getting along the way, and what it
Right.
takes to
So,
finally get it in?
yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Essentially, I made a decision. Well, WFP is great on the food, and that's their mandate, and they do that. I sort of did a survey in Gaza and understood that there were specific medicines that were not getting into Gaza for whatever reason. And I decided to go and source them. And I purchased medicines around Europe, um, and a few containers worth of medicines. And I've done this a few times. And there's a process through the Israeli government. It's the Israeli government agency is called COGAT, which I think you know, that everything has to go through COGAT. So I apply through COGAT and say, look, this is what I have. This is where I purchased it from. This is where it was made. This is how much it costs. This is how much each item is. This is what's in this box. This is what's in this box. And this is pallet number this. And everything has to be totally itemized. And, sort of they approve it. And then it's just a long process of getting the actual stuff physically in. So in my case, one time I tried to send it over, like I'm going to somehow still optimistic to try to make things work. So on one of the shipments, I tried to send it over JLOTS, the Joint Logistics Over the Shore, which was the pier that the United States government tried to work. Yeah. And it didn't,
One of those pallets.
yeah, it actually went and then was stuck by the next to the pier, and then the pier closed. And so then I had to look for another solution and wound up shipping it from Cyprus, where the JLOTS was based, to Ashdod, Israel. And then there's just a process, like the stuff's on the ship has to be cleared to come into port. That's a few days. Then the stuff has to be cleared to unload off the port. That's another few days. And there's this sort of things, like it's just not something that anyone is really taken too seriously in the United States government or really cares about, to be honest with you, because
And
this is all urgent
is
stuff.
any of that normal when it comes to humanitarian relief?
No, of course not. Sort of, if you need this stuff, you need to get it in, right? Like there's no, what it is, exactly every detail, how much I paid for it, how I paid for it. Like I provide like bank account, like everything. And, it's just like one reason after another to, one day the truck's about to go in and the generator breaks at one of the borders. And I'm like, this is one of the most sophisticated countries in the world. And their generator broke and now the border's closed. So I mean, I got lots of stories that I won't bore you with. It's kind of ridiculous.
Well,
If you get into the minutia, like I think I try to forget all the stuff that happens because I might, sort of just get depressed.
that's actually really interesting. I think we would welcome many examples and not be bored by them. And maybe, Ahmed, you could also flesh out the parallel that you were talking about with Ukraine is a great example right now, because the same people who are, saying Israel has to do this would say the opposite about Putin. If you could maybe flesh out what you've seen, like the ability to get humanitarian aid to people over there, that would
Yeah,
be,
no,
I
it's
think,
easy.
really
In Ukraine, it's
instructive.
very easy because the borders are open. Not the Russian border and not the Belarus border, but you have Poland, you have Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, Moldova. And those are all relatively friendly countries, and there are no issues. You can get whatever you want. You declare it, there's a process, but it goes right over and into wherever it's needed. In the case of Gaza, and like I said, there's no corollary for Gaza. There's never been a situation where all the borders are closed, and one entity controls what goes in or out. And so I sort of say, and people take this the wrong way, but I sort of say it's as if the Russians, if you want to think about Gaza, it's as if the Russians controlled all the borders. So they
Uh-huh.
controlled Poland and Hungary and Slovakia and Romania. Like they controlled what was going in. I mean, they literally could bomb those borders, but they don't.
Right.
But in the situation of Gaza, there's no other way to get anything in. Other than through Israel and through, sort of the good graces of the Israeli authorities. And I think there are some good actors in the Israeli government, but, they have their marching orders, and their marching orders are very clearly let the absolute minimum in, and no one's pushing us. And, the Biden administration, again, just, fumbled whatever leverage they had, and they have all the leverage because, 2 to 3 giant Air Force planes land full of weapons every day for the last over a year. But they just never pushed it, and so the Israelis understand, like, look, this is not important to the United States, so we'll keep doing what we're doing.
And can you, since you've spent so much time in Ukraine, can you compare how Israel approaches Palestinian civilian infrastructure and how Putin approaches Ukrainian civilian infrastructure?
I mean, there are some similarities, but there's literally nothing left in Gaza. I mean, you see my videos. Like, there's literally, you essentially when you enter Kerem Shalom, which is ironically named border crossing, you drive alongside of Gaza in Israel. So to your right, as you're driving south, is Gaza, and to your left is Israel, and your sort of life is normal, and their shopping malls and gas stations, etc. And when you enter Kerem Shalom, there are giant reinforced walls, 30 feet high, that are one after another, and so you sort of zigzag through these walls. And once you've crossed those walls, all you see is devastation. As soon as you enter, it's just rubble in every direction, and the first thing you see are kids playing in the rubble. And so there's no corollary for that. It's kind of wild that the amount of rubble in Gaza, which is the size of Philadelphia or Las Vegas, is, I think, twice to 3 times the amount of rubble that's in Ukraine, which is the size of Texas. And the war is 3 years old in Ukraine. So it's actually, I tell the Ukrainians that I come there to, I recently went directly from Gaza to Ukraine, and I said, and I actually went to the front, and I said, I'm here to relax after Gaza. So that was, everybody laughed, because what else do you do?
Well, yeah, because you had sent me one video from a place where you were sleeping, where it seemed like the windows were rattling all night long.
Yeah, it's bombs. It's the GBU 39. It's a glided air bomb that has electronics on it, which you can guide it. They're just massive bombs, and they just drop them over and over and over again. And no matter where you're sleeping, you'll hear them all night long, and they shake the ground and they shake everything. And essentially, what they do is, if there's a guy they're looking for who they think is Hamas, if anyone's around that guy, he's dead, or she's dead, or the 4-year-old kid is dead. And sort of, these bombs aren't checking people's IDs; they're just killing people.
The New York Times just confirmed in that long investigation.
Yeah, I mean, it's indisputable. Like, literally, sort of, there's nothing precise about any of it. They could be precise if they wanted to. And sort of, when you're driving around Gaza, it's like, kind of like in your thoughts, because if some sort of character that they're looking for happens to wind up next to your car, you're gone. They're not really asking questions or confirming or anything. And that's like, literally nobody can deny this. And again, the entire United States decision-making authority knows this, and that's just the way it is. So there's no corollary, actually. The Russians don't do. I mean, they've killed plenty of civilians, but it's just a different level.
If the Israeli goal is to depopulate Gaza, why don't they let at least the injured people out? Like, it feels like they're working at cross purposes to that goal.
No, I think it's part of the plan, right? Like, you get the people so desperate to the point where once you sort of move onto that mechanism of getting everybody out, then everybody just goes. But until that point, you're going to make life as miserable as possible for everyone. So we have this situation now where there are probably about 10,000 kids who either have pre-existing conditions like cancer or have been injured significantly and can't get out. And there is a process with the World Health Organization to get people out. And the Israelis will sort of approve 5 to 10% of the cases. And, I know these cases. I've seen these kids, and they're literally sitting in a tent with no chemotherapy, just dying. And their case was rejected, and you don't get an answer as to why it was rejected. And again, this is another failure of the U.S. administration, and sort of, it's like they just don't care, right? Like, there's no other answer for it. Why would you let 5, 10, 15,000 kids who are in urgent need of medical care and can be evacuated out just sit there But it's across the board. Like, there's no blood pressure medication, so people just die of heart attacks in their tents. I mean, it's like on and on and on and on.
Well, I was just going to ask like a hypothetical. If President Ryan Grimm were being inaugurated on January 20th, is it on the humanitarian front, not the military front, but on the humanitarian front, is it in the power of an incoming United States administration to almost like flip a switch on the humanitarian stuff and use the leverage and say, you are letting these in? Like, how theoretically simple would it be if someone wanted to, increase the input of humanitarian aid?
Yeah, if you decided that you don't want little kids to be suffering 24/7, you could scale up the amount of humanitarian aid in days. The United States government knows exactly what the needs are. The United Nations knows exactly what the needs are, what the calorie count is, medicine, etc. And it could happen immediately. I mean, the resources are out there, the stuff's out there, and you would just tell the Israelis, look, I can't abide by this. This is wrong, and change it tomorrow, literally.
Well, Ahmed, always appreciate your insights and also what you're doing for the people of Gaza. And thank you so much for joining us. Anything else you'd want to add for people?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are frustrated and trying to figure out how they can help and what they can do, and I think they should just keep at it. It's tough. It's really sad, but the people in Gaza appreciate them. They hear them. They understand that there are people with them that feel their plight, that are aware of them. And I think people just need to really just push the decision makers. Unfortunately, we're at a point in this world where there are just no world leaders who really, there's no empathy. It's just sort of apathy, I suppose. And there are certain things like with regard to the children's evacuations. That's something that has to happen. Increasing the amount of humanitarian aid, it has to happen. It's, again, the population. When they keep talking about Hamas, it's like there were about 20,000 before. Like 15 months ago, there were, let's say, 20,000 Hamas soldiers, or whatever you want to call them. I don't know how many there are now, but it's a war against women and children, essentially. 70% of the population are women and children. So, and literally, when you drive around Gaza, you just see children. Like, that's the thing you're struck in, just rubble and children. And you're wondering, like, where is this, Hamas? And I'm sure they're there, but you just don't see them. So I tell everybody to keep the faith, and we'll make a change one of these days.
We'll see. Ahmed Khan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Emily.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.